Okay, hello everybody. Thank you guys for coming. I'd love to introduce Samantha, a good friend and colleague of mine. We go back pretty far. And Samantha, can you start by introducing yourself and what's your harp background and what you have to share with us today?
Yeah. So I've been playing the harp forever. I started when I was four or five, something like that. Stuck with it, loved it. I like to say that my biggest strength is I love performing. So as soon as I started playing the harp, I was performing. Even if I was just playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, Mary Had a Little Lamb. Well, let me close my door. um, I still wanted to play for everybody. Anybody that came in the house was like, "Let me play for you," and that's really what helped me progress as quickly as I did. I joined orchestra when I was 10, and I started taking little music performance jobs not long after that, and I've never stopped really. I love playing for people. My big thing right now is I love playing in shows, musicals and operas and ballets. It's so much fun and just enough challenging. I worked at Harps Etc. for a long time. Actually, I'm back working at a Harps Etc. now. So once Harps Etc. opened, I was there because the owner, Jessica Siegel, was my teacher. So I know a lot about harps from working at Harps Etc. But being an orchestra player, since I was so young, I've had to know so much about how to take care of my harp. I started moving my harp on my own once I got tall enough, essentially. My parents were like, okay, now that you're going to have to learn how to do this yourself because you're going to be going to all these performances without us eventually. So that's really what we're getting into today is if you're going to be playing the harp and you're going to be playing the harp a lot, you got to know how to take care of it. Okay. Got a whole bunch of stuff around me. I'm trying to figure out what to start with first. Well, the beginning thing that you always have to know about your harp is how to tune it. And there are many things to remember when you're tuning your harp. So back here we have a lovely lever harp. Now I have my lever harp tuned in a different key. I have it tuned with 3 flats, which means when I'm playing it, I'm gonna have to put some levers up. So I have E's, A's, and B's. Put all those up. Oh, perfect. This harp is out of tune. Yeah. So I'd have all of these up while I'm playing and practicing. But when you're tuning, you never want to have any tension on your strings, any adjustments. So this goes for pedal harps and for lever harps. So I'll start with the lever harp. I'll switch over to the pedal harp in a minute. So once you want to tune the harp, you got to put the levers down. But also, every time you're leaving the harp, you want to make sure to put your levers down. This is not only going to just be nicer on your harp, because that is making the strings a little bit tighter, so you're putting a little bit more tension on the soundboard. So you always want to take that tension away when you're not playing the harp. But it's also going to increase the life of your strings because they're not being stretched. Okay, now I'm going to share my screen and show you what I use for tuning. You can use a tuning device, and if you are out and about or have a particularly full household, I highly suggest having a pickup mic attached to your tuner to filter everything out. This one is the ones that go into tuning key or tuners with the 1/4-inch jack, but they do make them for phones. And if somebody has a product, you would just have to put the little adapter on the end. So share my screen. Let's see if it'll work. I need the mating ID. Can you read off the meeting ID for me real quick? Or I can.
Yeah, let me. Is
Maybe
it?
I have it right here. Meeting information. Oh, okay, I got it.
Uh,
8,
oh, I should here share screen. There you go. Try
8,
it
2, 6, 7, 9.
I think I just gave you permission.
Oh, okay. Enter a sharing key.
Try now. I just think I just let you allow participants to share. Is that working?
Okay, I'll try again. We love
Can I make you co-host?
technology. That's okay. I'll just do the.
I'll make you a co-host.
8, 2, 6, 7, 9.
Make a
6,
host. I can make you a host.
3, 3, 5, 8. Okay.
Does that work?
Nope.
Okay,
Wait, it's connecting.
Okay. If it doesn't work, I'll make you host temporarily. Oh, okay. Hi, Samantha. That should work.
I should have told you that I was doing this. Start broadcast.
Did that work? Oh, yes.
Yes. All right, here we go. Got it. Okay. So, the tuning apps that I use for super simple, super easy, and straightforward, I use INS Tuner. I'm not sure who all knows this yet, but this one's only for Apple. So this is INS Tuner. Of course, it's not going to do it. Well, it's not going to tune on the screen, unfortunately. I've done it before. Somebody play a note on a harp.
Can you pop up and play a harp note? Here. My harp
Baby squeals in the background.
Say it louder.
Let me see if I can just close out of it and open it back up. Well, my plan has been thwarted.
Okay, well, it's coming on our side.
So you have INS Tuner there. It's super user friendly. It'll tell you in words, tune higher, tune lower, and it'll light up nice and green when you have got it in tune. So that's that. This one is pretty good. This one is for Android. Let's see if this one will listen, shall we? Nah. So this is called Clear Tune, as it says on the bottom. And you'll want to follow this this little line. I can't. Oh well. You want to follow the red line in the middle, and that'll be moving around, as well as this where the letters are down here. That will turn and tell you what note you're playing.
You want to get the red line to get to the 0.
Yes, you want that to be 0. And then for anybody that wants a challenge, if you want to get a really, really, really precise tune, there's a strobe tuner.
Yeah, tell us how to use that one. I have it.
I really wish it would actually pick up what I'm playing. So you'll see that it's moving right now. And the speed at which these lines move is how not in tune you are. Your goal is to get them to all stop moving, to line up and stop moving. And if you see down where it says sense is just how far off from the note you are. So your ultimate goal is to get that to say 0.0, to be absolutely perfectly in tune. So this is just one way to get finding. Is not a little bit of learning. So let me see. I'll stop sharing my screen and see if I can have it show up on. All right. Yeah, there we go. So now it's listening to me. Wrong tuner. I want this tuning key. So it's still moving a little. it will actually have little arrows over here that tell you which direction you need to tune. You can see them freaking out right now. And it gets bigger or smaller with just how far off it is. So I need to go up ever so slightly. There we go. Almost. But that's good enough for me. Everything stopped moving. Let's see if I have something that sounds really bad. There we go. Not lots of movement. So then I want to go up a little bit more. Also, the bars traveling downward means you need to tune higher. The bars traveling upward means you need to tune lower.
Samantha, is it true that these also find dead strings?
I'm not sure. It's possible. I haven't really had an experience with that, but I guess you could consider a dead string to be a string that never actually gets really in tune. You're constantly fighting it up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Otherwise, you can actually hear a dead string on a harp. It tends to sound kind of muffled, not as full. And a lot of times it's these strings that die. The lower strings, those will tend to break. But these ones up here, they may not break, they may just die. And why that's important is nylon strings. So this harp, a lot of dusty strings, use a lot of nylon strings. And nylon strings are pretty strong. So they have a long life, as it were. They stay on the harp, they're really reliable, they can take a beating. But just like your shoes or your clothes, they do wear out. Even if they stay on the harp, they may not sound as great as they used to and need to change. It's highly recommended that whether or not you're playing the harp, you restring the harp. I like to do, like, economically, every other year in a perfect world. Like, if you can afford it, your ideal is to at least restring your entire harp every other year, every 2 years. Now, me, as somebody that plays all the time and beats my strings up in shows, which are really loud, and I do a lot of glissandos and really beat my strings up, if my strings don't break, I have to change in a perfect world, if I can afford it, change my strings at least twice a year. If not, after every show. Just because musicals and operas and ballets really tax the strings because I'm trying to get over the orchestra. What Harps Etc. and other professionals would recommend is changing your strings every year, but again, I know it can be pretty expensive. So
for the students who don't know, how much does it cost to change a pedal harp?
A pedal harp, so it's just off screen over here, but a full set of strings is about $600, and the doctor's appointment for it is about $500. And then if you don't string the harp yourself, if you have somebody else restring the harp for you, that can be another $300, $400. It gets pretty pricey. So definitely knowing how to change your strings on your harp yourself will save you a lot of money. And then if you can manage to take your harp to the technician that can do the doctor's appointment on it, that'll save you a little bit of money too, because if you have them come directly to you, they'll charge a travel fee. So, harp's expensive, but it's worth it. And it's like, I play the harp too, is like, oh my god, there's not many people that play the harp. Whereas in my head I go, there's plenty of people who play the harp. But all those people that play the harp kind of play just for themselves. So this many people that play the harp, people see. Anyway, back to care. So when you're tuning your harp, you always want to have your hand on your tuning key. You never want to leave it on the harp without your hand on it. yes, it stays there, but that you're always having a risk that it's going to pop off the harp and fall and damage your harp. Another thing that you're going to want to do is, as much as possible, you want to start at the lowest strings. The reason that you need to start at the low strings is because the low strings have an overtone to them. They have multiple sounds that the tuner can pick up, and if those overtones are in tune, then the rest of the harp will be just that much more in tune. If you tune the rest of the harp and then you tune the low strings, the rest of the harp might not be completely in tune with the low strings, even though you just tuned the entire harp. So it's kind of like, it's counterproductive. A lot of times though, like these really low strings, they may not be picked up very well on the tuner. Like if I played this right now, it may not pick up as C, the tuner may read the overtone, which is E. So it's totally okay to start at like the next C up if the tuner picks that up. So you tune that one, and then this will be a great way to try and train your ear to hear how things sound out of tune. So let's see if I can. I don't know how much of it will be picked up over Zoom, but what I'm hearing, so my lowest C is out of tune, and you kind of hear this wobble. Wah, 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 wah. And your goal is to get rid of that wobble. So again, let me see which one's out of tune. Yes, it's the low one. Get my orientation there. So I'll tune the note that the tuner picks up, and I'll play the two notes together. So I hear that wobble. So now I'm going to do little adjustments. Ever so slightly. There we go. It's just about in tune. There's a tiny, tiny little wobble, but I have a feeling I'll be playing around with it for an hour to try and get it perfect. Yeah, it's better. Now, if you play loud enough, again, I'm not sure if Zoom can pick it up, so let me detune that string again so we can make it sound all wobbly.
Picking it up, and I'm glad that you're addressing tuning by ear because that's great.
So here's my wobble again. I'll play it nice and loud. And while it's vibrating, I'm going to tune that low C, and you can actually kind of hear it come up to pitch and then match our in tune note. And what I like to call that is I call that the tuning sing, or the string sing. You can kind of hear the two notes match each other, and then it's almost like they just get louder together. So they just sort of like, they project and sing together. So it's really cool to hear them harmonize. Again, I'm not sure how much Zoom picks up, but I just did it. So you just kind of hear it vibrating, and then you hear it go, ah. Almost like if you were singing, you went, ah, and then ah. It's a really cool little thing that once you notice it, you're like, oh, I'm going to hear that every single time I tune by ear. Let's do another one. My harp is not liking the heat. It gets really hot in my office, unfortunately. Ow, that was a bad idea. Don't do that. I have a brace on my hand right now. I have mommy thumb from picking my baby up with my thumbs. Never do that. It hurts your thumbs. Okay. So then you would match those until you've hit your note that you've already tuned, and then you just keep going up the harp like normal. Now, one way to help you get across the harp, because I know sometimes you're like, how can I find my string while also tuning? I'm not looking at it more noticeable. So the way that you can blindly help your hand up or down the harp as you're tuning is you move your thumb from, I'm kind of sliding it along the tuning key here. So I'm moving my thumb up to the next tuning pin. So like from the tuning pin that I'm on, up to the next one. And then it's hard to do sitting down. I use now that my thumb is perched on that, then I have a place to go. So I just walk up the harp like that, one by one. So I don't even have to look at my tuning pins anymore. I'm just slowly walking up. It takes some practice, it takes some confidence, and you can still absolutely do your whole, I'm on this string, check here and down. But sometimes it's not always reliable, especially when you're on a harp that's way taller than you are. So a good thing to practice would be thumb guiding. Your thumb is guiding you to the next pin. And then whenever you're tuning, really make sure you hear that ka-thunk of your tuning key locking into place all the way to the tuning pin. You don't want it to be halfway on the tuning pin, so otherwise you'll wear it down, you'll strip it like a screw. Let's see. The last thing about tuning is something that we don't always get told. When you're tuning most harps, triplets, it's a little different. When you're tuning a harp that the strings wrap counterclockwise towards the neck, you want to be pushing in on the tuning pin slightly when you tune. So you want to try and think about pushing the tuning pin further into the neck. You don't want to really like put your body into it, but it's ever so slightly a push in and turn. The reason that we do this is because as you continue to tune your harp, your string is continuing to wrap around the tuning pin, and eventually it's going to have nowhere to go if it doesn't break. It's going to wrap towards the neck, wrap, keep wrapping towards the neck. And if you haven't pushed that tuning pin in, that string is just going to dig right into the neck. The string will win. So there have been several harps that I've seen come through the store that have these dents in the neck because they just have the string that's completely wrapped and overwrapped around the tuning pin that's just chewing into the neck. So to combat that, we push the tuning pin in while we tune. And then, because we do that, when we restring that note, we want to only push the tuning pin, or we want to back out the tuning pin if you don't take the tuning pin out altogether. I don't have any broken strings on my harps right now, but I might still be able to demonstrate taking a tuning pin out.
Yeah, I have some broken strings and stuff like that, so if we need to demonstrate.
Okay, yeah, and that'll be good. So I can walk you through that, and you can demonstrate there as well as here. Any questions about tuning?
Do you guys want to have questions so far? Did you guys know all that about the harp stringing, singing, and no tuning by ear?
So lever harps, make sure your levers are down. I just got stabbed by a string end. Pedal harps.
Okay, that was good. So I can put my zoom over so you can see my harps, or we can use your harp or whatever. Where'd she go? Oh, there she is. I think you're on mute, Samantha. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Curses. Okay, so for pedal harps, you want to make sure all of your pedals are up in their highest setting, up and flat. And then, yeah, definitely, this is a harp that's taller than me. So once you get to tuning, let me get my tuning key here. Put you guys on my. So obviously, I'm going to be on panorama because that's going to be smart. Yeah, I see over here, it's taller than I am. So this is really where that thumb guiding comes into play. And counterintuitive, going against what I just said, when it comes to the pedal harp, a lot of times I'll kind of tune most of it up, but I'll tackle these guys last. And that's mostly just a time being efficient. Of course, my harp is going to sound better if I tune all the way from the bottom to the top. But I don't know. I kind of don't want to take out all my energy on these and then tackle the rest of the harp. So to tune these low strings, I'll come to the other side of the harp. I'll count where I need to be. So like, say I'm on the lowest A on the harp. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's number 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is really where tuning by ear comes into play because the tuner is not going to pick these notes up. Especially if I get down to this low C. It can't hear that at all. And a lot of times I can't even hear it. So to tune my low D and low C on this harp, I'll stick my ear in the back of the harp while I play both of them together. And my C is tuned to natural right now, so this is the only time where you're going to be able to move a pedal while you tune because the low C does not have a pedal adjustment on it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Really hard to hear sometimes. That's where you really want to trust that pedal sing. But if you're trying to tune your harp around a bunch of other people that are playing instruments, it can be really hard. So the pedal harp, it's super, super, super important to be tuning and pushing because gut strings are the ones that are much more likely to be digging into the harp. Let's see. Like this guy here is getting pretty wrapped. So I always want to make sure that I have a little bit of space between the string and the tuning pin. This one too is getting pretty thick. And a lot of times, if a technician sees these strings and just how many wraps are around the tuning pin, they'll suggest that you restring it. If it hasn't broken, then that's an indication that it's time to change a string by how many wraps are up on the tuning pin as well. Let's see. Anything else about tuning?
Well, we can to start changing strings if you feel like it.
Sure.
Anything else?
Okay, changing strings.
Your questions on.
Changing strings can always be a little bit of a daunting task.
Get everyone
Switch. Oh, I have to do it on my computer. Switch back to my computer.
All right. So changing strings can always be kind of nerve-wracking because everybody always is like, I don't understand how to tie that knot. But it's not as crazy as you think it is. So in a perfect world, if you're a harpist that is performing pretty frequently, or at least taking your harp places, you should try to have a set of strings on hand. So as someone that performs a lot, I have a complete set of pedal harp strings in a bag with me all the time. This is a specially made bag for strings. You don't have to. You can just have them nicely packaged somehow. But all the way from the first octave down to the metal strings. Now, these are not the strings that I would be completely restringing my harp in. These are my emergency strings. They're not in the best condition. They're kind of old. They are just in case something drastic happens. A lot of times it's actually good to get a new string and replace that string that you just replaced with a So it's just like a spare tire on a car. It's there to help you get from point A to point B, but you ultimately want to put a brand new string on it. Okay, tying strings. It's always going to be easiest to practice tying a string with a tiny string. They don't fight you back. They're pretty malleable. This is a gut string, so it is going to be a little kinky. Nylon strings are going to be the absolute best thing to practice with because they won't kink very much. They might kink a little bit. And that's important. So kinking on gut strings, so anybody that has a classical harp, that is damage to the string. So you want to limit just how much damage you're doing on the string. So it's way better to practice on something that you don't have to worry about putting into your harp. That's the one thing that everybody's nervous about. It's like, I just put this string in my harp and it broke. It probably broke because you tied it maybe 3 times. So you wore out the bottom of the string and it decided to break. Again, nylon strings won't do this. Okay, so tying. I always try and figure out the best way to describe this. I don't always match people very well, so I hope that you can kind of get what I'm doing. I do a tie that can be a little bit difficult to some people. So I like to have this is the end of the string, and this is going to be the rest of the string. So this is where your knot's going to be. This is going to be the rest of the string is going to go through the harp. So in whatever hand you're going to be tying with, I like to have about 4 fingers length of that end in my hand. So you can see the little end of the string sticking out. And this is going to give you enough space to work with and isn't going to be damaging the string too much. Now, this hand that's holding this bit is not going to do anything. All it's there to do is hold the string. All of your manipulation is going to be with the other hand. So let's see how well we can get this. With your manipulating hand, you're going to take this string and you're going to make a loop that crosses in front, so towards your face. Pull it a little bit smaller, and then you can hold on to it with your end hand, with your non-moving hand, just so that you have it in place. Now, because this is a smaller string, a lot of times we'll do a double knot, but I'll come back to the double knot. So we'll complete this single knot first. So we have our first loop, we're holding on to it. Now with our moving hand, we're going to make one more loop that crosses in back, so away from you. Now these bunny ears that we have here, if you took your thumbs away, you would see that there's this sort of U of the string. That's how you know you've done it right. So you have this U that's facing you. Now, the loop that's furthest away, the second loop that you made, you're going to take it, put it behind your first bunny ear, and then put it through the loop, but only halfway. So you're still holding on to it. You haven't really you haven't threaded it through this loop. You're still gonna have these 2 loops. I'll do that one more time. So I have my first loop, I have my second loop, I take this second loop and point it towards me. Like if you're looking at it, you're pointing that loop towards you and sticking it through that first loop, but halfway. So your thumbs and your fingers are like halfway into that loop. So now that we have this, the trickiest part is you want to keep that loop halfway through. So I've kind of grabbed onto it, keeping it between that keeping it between that first loop, and now I'm going to take the rest of the string that I had in my 4 fingers and I'm going to pull. And you can kind of help that knot along by pinching it and pulling it. And there it is. Didn't mention back. It's hard when I'm practicing on a tiny string. There's no big strings that I want to sacrifice right now. So let's do that again. To undo this, if you have it successfully tied, you're just going to pull on the one that has a loop and it'll all just come undone. And if you have a gut string, now it's all lovely and bent. All right, let's try again. I guess I have my 4 fingers in my wrong hand. So the 4 fingers should be your manipulating hand. Sorry. All right, let me reverse that. So your manipulating hand is going to be the one that has the 4 fingers measure holding on to it. And then the hand that's holding the rest of the length of the string, that one's not doing much. It's just there. So I'll do it again. So we have the loop that crosses in front, loop that crosses in back, point it towards you, through, and we pull. Now, this is just a knot, and this isn't the most secure thing in the world when it comes to a tiny string. If you have a big, thick string, then just this knot will be fine. But oftentimes with these smaller strings, a 1st octave, a 2nd octave, a 3rd octave, sometimes even a 4th octave string, just depends on the harp that you have. What we like to do is use, let me get a colored one. This is, some people nickname a string end, a toggle, whatever you want to call it. All it is a little piece of a thicker string, a gut string, that I broke and I cut up into pieces. So we're going to end up tying this knot around this string bit, and this is going to prevent that knot from possibly pulling through the harp. It's just going to make it a firm grip. So how you add a string end to your knot, kinky, kinky, kinky. Okay. So the hand that's maneuvering and has that extra length, if you are super confident, you don't even need to worry about having this length to work with. You can just sort of place that string end wherever you like it to be. I kind of like to leave maybe about 1 centimeter of extra string. Sometimes I might even match, it just depends on how nervous I am at the time. So with my maneuvering hand, I'm holding on to the string end with my string. Yes. So I make my first loop, it gets held onto. I make my second loop, and my second loop is with that string end. So they are together. And this is a nice way to indicate just how far you should put this loop through the back of the other loop, because you don't want the entire string end to go on the other side of the loop. You want it to be halfway through so that you end up cinching the knot down. So here I have that loop and the string end now halfway through the first loop. I'm gonna move my fingers so that I end up pinching the string end and that second loop together, so that when I pull, the knot will cinch down onto the string end and the knot at the same time. It's kind of loose right now because I have a gut string, and sometimes gut strings don't want to hold. Now if you find that that string end is all slippy slidey in your knot, you can still hold on to it when you put the string in the harp, and once you get the string in the harp, you can kind of pull on it really tightly so that the knot will just cinch even further down into the harp and hold onto that string end. So in that case, you want to really keep tension on that string in your harp, really pull it tight so that once you start tuning, you're not going to lose your string end in your harp. I've done that many times. It's fallen into the depths of my harp and I've lost it. Especially on the big harp. The big harp, I don't know how many string ends are lost in the base of my harp. Okay, let's see. Again, I don't have any strings. Not even on my tiny harp. Oh darn.
No, the kids are learning how to tie knots. They're struggling, but they're getting it.
Yeah, and it is a struggle, and it does take time. A couple things that do make it easier to practice tying this knot. Twizzlers. If you like Twizzlers, peel them apart, and they're really easy to tie into these knots because they don't sort of run away from you. They pretty much stay where you put them, and it's nice and big. I've tried yarn before. It's a little bit too weak. It doesn't have any structure to it, so it's all floppy. Pipe cleaners can work, but you have to combat the fluffiness of pipe cleaners, and sometimes you can't even see the knot through all the fuzz. Oh, hi, kitty! So Twizzlers have been the one thing that's not a string that works really well for me. You could cut a thick rubber band, like a vegetable rubber band, the really big ones, and that one will be a little bit better than yarn or regular string. But again, still doesn't have very much tension to it. You want something that's going to have tension but not be like trying to bend wire. Ooh, that'd be bad. Any questions? No?
Any questions from the people on Zoom right now? Because luckily we have a couple broken string. We have a broken string on my harp, so I could show them the rest of the way. I'm just trying to find my string. Nobody has questions online?
There's a string on my harp that I'm willing to sacrifice.
There we go.
Because I just broke 2 strings at my show. That was fun.
Yeah, well, we're not talking about cats right now. My students are distracted by cats. But I'm gonna grab the string real fast, and then I could show you the broken one. It's a 3rd octave G.
Okay. So I mentioned a double knot earlier. What a double knot is it's just gonna add one more loop in that first loop. You're just going to make a second one. So 2 loops that cross. The knot's not coming out now. So 2 loops, 1, 2 that cross in front, and you're just gonna hold on to them together, and you want to try and keep them together because again, that's where the other loop is going to go halfway through. So just 2 loops instead of 1. And there's another way of tying knots on strings. I've been shown it many times, and it just in one ear out the other because I'm so used to doing it this way. It is easier, so if you're ever at Harps, etc., ask the front desk lady to show you how she ties the knots, because I think it can just be like a normal knot that you're tying your shoe with, but I don't know. I've learned the other way so well that I just can't even process a new way of tying.
Okay, so you want to walk me? I'll do it, but if you want to walk me through it as if I didn't know, then everyone can watch me.
Sure.
So
it's always going to be easier. It takes a little bit more.
Get out and make sure that they can knock it back. There we go. Is that better, guys? Can everyone see that now? Okay,
It takes a little bit more thought, but it will be easier, especially if you get to the higher strings, to put the string in the harp first before tying your knot.
Okay, so
because
here's putting the harp in first. You guys see that?
That way you can stick it through the front of the harp and feed the string through the harp so you can grab it out the back.
Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and tie the knot for everybody. I would let someone demo, but this is a gut string and I don't want it broken.
Yes. So gut strings, you really want to be like, okay, one and done.
Done right there.
A what string?
A gut, we can answer the different, Samantha, after I do this, why don't you tell the different types of strings? It sounds like some students don't know the difference between gut and nylon.
So all these lovely folks that have pedal harps, they all use multiple types of string. The top strings are nylon. Most of the middle of the harp is made out of gut, and that is an actual animal fiber. It is cow specifically, but don't be creeped out, don't be gross. They are super, super treated. They are no longer like an animal product. They are now a fiber. Those strings are wire. Now on my harp, you see that I have these white strings. My harp, I don't have nylon strings on my pedal harp. I have these painted gut strings. These are called Concedo gut, and that's just so I can see them a little bit better, since I often play in orchestra pits where it's a little bit dark. So these I can see a little bit better in the dark.
Makes a lot of sense. I always keep one hand on the knot, and then I put a lot of tension on this one as I pull. So see how I'm having tension? And then as I pull it through, I squeeze my hand in the back, which may or may not fit, and then I pull. This secures the knot. Okay?
Yes, exactly.
On the string. And then
Now for the pedal harp, because Kristal's on a pedal harp right now, what you have to make sure to do is you want your string to be right in the center of, they're called the discs, those things on the harp that have the little prongs that point forward. Those are what adjust your string to make flats, naturals, and sharps. So you want your string to be through both of them, right in the middle. And then there are 2 pins that you have to make sure that your string is on the pedal harp. There is the bridge pin, which is just above those pedal mechanisms. And then there is the tuning pin, which the tuning pin, the string goes through. And it's always going to be much easier when you're restringing a harp. You're going to turn your tuning pin so that the hole in it is straight up and down. That way you just have to put the string up into the harp. You don't have to try and find the hole. Just make your life easy. So once you've got the string through the harp, if you're stringing all of the natural fiber strings, the gut strings and the nylon strings, you'll pull that string tight. So holding on to that string, you might want to come down a little bit further. You don't want to be up in the air. You want to be a little bit closer to the harp because you're going to have to do a little bit of work with that end of the string. So what I like to do is I like to turn my tuning key a half a turn. So that if you had your string straight up and down, now the end is pointing down. So from here, so have my string pointing down, this is my tuning pin. So what I'll do is I'll push on the string a little bit so that it makes a little, loop is the wrong word because it's not really a loop. It just sort of bulges out. And then you kind of want to hold on to it while you're turning. And what that's doing is as you're turning, it's going to take the tight string and pinch off the loose string. So you have this sort of little,
like where Ada is,
little string underneath all of the wraps. So if you look at your own harps and you look at the tuning pins on your own harps, you might be able to see this little bit of string that's kind of going sideways. So that's what we want to see up on the tuning pin, is you have this one little bit of string that's going sideways and the rest of the string is wrapped on top of each other. Now, most of the time that sideways string will just be under one loop and then the rest will just be free.
Then watch as I do this, I push it in.
And once you get that little sideways piece pinched between 2 wraps on the tuning pin, that's usually the first sign that you've hit the pitch of that string. So that's, at that point, that's where you get your tuner out and you start tuning to pitch. So you have a half turn and then another 1 turn, usually. The nylon strings can be a little bit stretchier and they might take a little bit more. So you've got that first string on the harp and you may get it in tune or you may not. You may have to keep turning it a little bit. So once you have it in tune, I say in air quotes, because this string is going to keep going out of tune, keep going out of tune, keep going out of tune until you've told it over and over and over that it has to be at this pitch. Training a string to hit this pitch. But so we're not done yet. The harp is the string is on the harp. Once you get it up to pitch, what you're going to do, especially on a gut string, is you're going to push on the string that you've just. You can push it, you can pull it, you can beat it up a little bit. Don't be afraid, it's not gonna break. Kind of want to bend it, push it a little bit, and what this is doing is it's hoping that string down slightly, and you're encouraging it to find pitch faster. So it's almost like you're playing it for an extra week just by doing this. So it will eventually stay in tune faster. Whereas if you didn't do that, you might be tuning this string for a month. But because we've done that little bit of abuse, it might only take a couple of days to a week to stay in tune. So now that your string's in tune, your string's on the harp, it's great. What do you do with the rest of that? So you've got this great coil of string that you want to keep to use again, hopefully. So what I like to do to remind myself that that's a new string is I'll keep about an inch of string on the top of the harp. So you clip your excess string and leave about an inch behind on the harp. Now this isn't going to stay there forever. This is just a little reminder that that string needs a little bit more attention. And that's also going to allow for any extra movement that string does to not just end up that string coming untied on your harp. That's the worst thing ever. So once that string is finally in tune, then you can clip that a little bit shorter so it's not in your face, it's not grabbing your hands, it's not an eyesore. And then save that remainder of string to use again. And if it's not quite long enough to use again for that string, you can always label that as your practice string.
Yeah, that helps. I might have some strings that they can, like, my pedal harp has some dead strings. So I figured if you want to share anything else about taking care of the harp, and then I might have the students here practice actually changing one of my strings.
Sure. So another very basic, super important thing to do with your harp is dust it.
Dust it.
It's a big thing. It gathers dust. So I have this microfiber cloth that I got from the American Harp Society's convention ages ago when it was in San Francisco. So this is kind of like a jewelry cloth. It's fuzzy on one side and firm on the other side. They do sell like wood cloths that are also kind of like this jewelry cloth texture, or you can just use a microfiber towel. You want to avoid using like a Swiffer duster on your harp. Sure, it's going to get the dust out of the harp, but you also might grab a lot of the fluff out of the duster, and you might have fluff all over the harp mechanisms. So the most important dusting to do is going to be on the soundboard. Get my harp back. You don't want dust built up on the soundboard. One, it's going to catch your eye and be distracting. Two, it's going to look really sad. But if you leave dust on your harp for a long period of time, it's going to get stuck there. It's going to catch moisture in the air, oils in your hands, any sort of moisture around. It's going to catch that, and it's going to like cake onto your harp. So you want to dust your harp often. I don't want to say every day because you don't really need it, but when you notice it, I try to dust my harp like once a week. I like to go from the top of the harp down, right up against the strings, play a little muffled glissando. Do the other side. And I always come back up, so I'll go like against the strings, come back up against the side of the harp, because you never know if your palm actually is resting there. You kind of want to go again, really getting into the strings. If you want, you can go each individual string, or you can just press a little further. There's this space right after your last string, right by the column, the pillar. So you want to get in there. You'll especially want to get the right side of the harp up here. That's where your arm sits. And then left side of the harp where you might end up holding onto the harp with your fingers. If you're somebody that clutches your harp with your knees, that's another important thing to get. You want to try and get as much of the oils off of your harp as possible. As best you can, get the top of the neck, because dust will gather there. And that's about as much as we can do with a cloth. You can also get the bottom of the harp a little bit. But what I also have is a very fine paintbrush. Like you could use a brush. You just that's soft. This one, it does feel a little bit firm, but it's mostly so I can get into all the carvings on my pedal harp. So with any sort of brush, that's gentle on the harp. Again, you don't want it to scratch the harp. you'll get all the little mechanisms. So all the dust that's gathering on your levers, on your tuning pins, into the bridge pin, playing some ghostly glissandos. You'll get the back of the tuning pin. Any sort of little joint that's going to be on your harp, you want to get the dust out of that as well. So this is a good option for the bottom of the harp where there are all those joints on pedal harps. They have carvings sometimes, like mine has a bunch of carvings, so I have to go into every little bit of carving and brush away all that dust. This, you can also use this brush for those between the strings as well. You can sometimes, I might suggest doing this first and then wipe the harp down with your cloth, because this will cause a bunch more dust to now be sitting on my soundboard. All right, dusting, tuning. For clipping strings, when you replace a string, you don't have to have any fancy cutters. I don't recommend using scissors. It can hurt your hands, especially if it's a thicker string. Everybody should have fingernail clippers around their harp. You can absolutely use fingernail clippers to clip strings. It's pretty easy. It can get a little harder on the thicker pedal harp strings. So you can have little tiny wire cutters. For the wires on the harp, those can be a little hard to clip. So what I have, these are pliers that the wire cutter is outside of the pliers. So this way I can actually really get in there to clip that string. If you have the pliers that have the wire cutter in between the two jaws, it can be kind of hard to maneuver it in there. So this was an amazing tool. I know Line & Healy sells this, the harp store sells this, but I'm pretty sure hardware stores might have this type of wire cutter. And this just makes clipping wire strings 10 times easier. I no longer am like getting up on a chair and trying to muscle clipping those scary strings. Care of pedal harp, care of lever harp. You do want to pay attention to your harp's well-being. You want to keep it out of direct sunlight. Sunlight is going to not only fade the color on the harp, but it can damage the finish and cause it to bubble. So keeping it out of direct sunlight. You don't want the harp to get too hot. The harp is just held together by glue, so if it gets upper 90s, hundreds, then you run the risk of some of the glue melting, the harp shifting, and scary things. So I always like to keep the harp, I like to err on the side of below 80 and below 80 degrees. My preference is 74 or lower, but also that's preference for me. I'm a hot person. I like to be in cooler weather. Out of sunlight. A great place to keep a harp is in a corner, out of traffic. You don't want people running into your harp. Whenever you're picking up a harp, carrying a harp, you always want to have two hands on it. One on the front, one on the back, and preferably inside one of the sound holes, so you have a firm grip on the harp. Just like sandwiching the harp, it could easily slip out of your hand over here. So as firm of a grip as you can. Don't use your back to lift your harp, use your knees to lift your harp, or you use a harp belly. What's our time? We're almost out of time. Let's see. Oh, one thing I didn't do when we were changing the string. So a good habit to get into when you're replacing a string, if you're not in a hurry, if it's just at your house, you can take the tuning pin out of the harp. Most harps. Some lever harps you might not be able to. Tuning pins are tapered. They go from thick to thin, and that's just how they're held into the harp. That taper end. You can wiggle the tuning pin and push it out. You can dust it off, blow out the dust that's in the hole that the tuning pin was in, and put it back. And that's going to give you a much snugger fit so less likely for tuning pins to slip. A tapered tuning pins can come a little bit loose when you're tuning, so you're tuning and it'll just not stay where you put it, it'll just slide back. So if that ever happens, push on that tuning pin a little bit more, give it some elbow grease. What else is on my desk here? If you end up learning how to change your entire harp yourself, I do it all the time to save a little bit of money. I'm getting hungry. I like to wear gloves. These are gardening gloves that have a little bit of rubber on them. This is just to protect my hand from tying strings over and over and over again. It gets really exhausting on a 47-string pedal harp, so having some sort of hand protection, finger protection is going to make it a lot easier to get that job done. This is sort of just tool of the trade that I've picked up working at the store. But so this is a little medical device called a hemostat or a clamp. It's just a clamp. I use this to get up into the high strings where you really can't get your hand up there. I use this to get the strings there. This is, again, not something you're going to find all over the place, but I don't really have an alternative for this. Tweezers, like big industrial tweezers, won't work. Little hands. That's where feeding the string through the front of the harp is really going to come into play. So you really feed that string down, use all of the length so that it eventually will pop out one of the highest sound of all. You can see it. Another fun thing that not many people have. So these are string mufflers. They are very helpful for tuning to cut out those overtones that I mentioned. So they have, it's just a piece of foam with slits in it, and it slides onto your low strings and stops them from vibrating. So it's just hanging out there. So I have 2 of them because the pedal harp has a lot of wire strings I need to muffle. And if you're tuning the rest of your harp before those low strings, this is great. So it stops those overtones, so you won't have that tuning issue that I mentioned a while ago. But again, harder thing to find. The harp store might still have them, I don't know. It was something we had a while ago. If you have a lot of string ends, I highly suggest repurposing something to carry your string ends in. This is a spice jar. Altoid case works really well in mint cases. Don't buy something specifically for your string ends, just reuse something. A little jar that I carry all my string ends around in. If you're really into it and you really want to make sure you have all of the tools that you could possibly have, this is a regulation kit for a lever harp. Pretty fancy. So it comes with little bolt cutters, little wire cutters, a little brush, and this is a tool that you can put multiple heads on. So if you look up at lever harps, pedal harps have different mechanisms than what this is going to use. There are all these little screws and things, screws and bolts and stuff. So these are all the different tools to adjust those screws and bolts and things. In here is string ends. I cleaned it out, but there were string ends in here. And there's a little wrench if you ever have to. What else is in here? No, never mind. There's a little wrench in case you need to adjust something inside the harp. Again, this is a Dusty Strings product. This is for all their different harps. Not all of the harps are going to need all of the tools in this. It's just in case for anything. But it's cool, it comes in its own little case. But the things I highly recommend getting: a microfiber cloth to dust with, a soft brush to dust with. It could be a makeup brush, it could be just a firm but not too bristly paintbrush, and definitely have fingernail clippers, if not wire cutters. And then always have your tuning key nearby. I highly recommend getting at least 2 tuning keys, so you have one at home and one in your music bag, because you never know where you're going to need a tuning key. I have at least 5 tuning keys. One in my car, one next to my harp, one in a drawer, one in my purse. I have 2 in my gig bag. This one is missing. Actually, like, I have a one, I have a purple one. I just keep putting them in there and going, oh wait, that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah, I was just telling them I have like one in every pocket, everywhere.
Every place that you could possibly think of having a tuning key, needing a tuning key, put one there. Same with fingernail clippers. A tuning key and fingernail clippers. Everywhere. That's about it. If we had more time, I was going to go through cases and things, but we're just about out of time.
Oh, but so good. So, guys, do you have any questions? Because that felt like that was really helpful and very useful. Because I know that people have dead strings and need to change them quickly.
Does it matter if you use fingernails? Well, can you still use fingernail clippers on your harp if you've clipped your toenails with them?
What was the question?
She's like, can you still use fingernail clippers on your harp if you've used them on your toenails?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you're worried about it, you just wash them.
Just disinfect them.
Yeah.
With all the tools that you're showing up, we were like, okay, is this a harpist or a serial killer?
I know the hemostat's a little scary. It's just a clamp. It's just a clamp.
The guys on Zoom, you've been really quiet. If you're still there, Haley, I know you have some dead strings on your harp, so you have some work to do.
Yeah, dead strings are just going to be not as loud as other strings. They don't ring for very long. They might even sound a little wobbly no matter how much you tune them. Or they can kind of sound like you're playing two notes at once.
Oh yeah, the overtone.
That's called a false string, actually, when you kind of hear this two notes at once situation. So that's just a dead string, even if you just put that string on that harp.
Yeah, and I give everybody a chart for
yeah.
string, so they all got that.
Good.
Deborah, I know that you had questions about tuning strings. Do you have anything else before we wrap up? No? Okay. Anyone here? No? Do you guys feel more empowered to take care of your harp and to tune it?
Yeah.
And clip your fingernails.
Oh, yes. Tell us about that.
So fingernails, long fingernails will wear down the strings faster. That's one of the reasons we clip our fingernails. The other reason is because it sounds bad, and another reason is because it feels bad. If you have fingernails on the harp and you're playing, your fingernails will catch the string and you'll feel them, and it doesn't feel great. So clip your fingernails, both for your safety and your harp safety. Again, strings are expensive. We want them to last as long as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, and then I just tell everyone if they don't know what string to get, call Harps, etc.
Yes. If you don't know what string you need, what we do need to know is what harp you have. So this harp is a Dusty string, so we need to know the maker, Dusty Strings. The model, this is a Ravenna 34. 34 is important. This harp has 34 strings. There's also a Ravenna that has 26 strings. So Ravenna 34, not a Ravenna 26. And then you want to know about where the string is. It always helps to take a picture. Take a picture and send it to us. We love that. If you take a picture of the full harp and then you kind of zoom in on the string that you broke, we can absolutely help you. Otherwise, we can guide you through where that harp is, where that string is. So for the future, this is the bottom. Your long strings are the bottom. This is the top. Your short strings are the top. So counting from the top, what string is it? Like what note is it? If you broke like this middle C, if you broke middle C, you could always just say middle C. We absolutely know what middle C is. But I broke the third F from the top or the third F from the bottom. I mean, we'll know either way. But the maker of your harp, the model of your harp. And if you don't know, you can always just take a picture of the harp and send it to us, and we can help you identify the harp. A lot of times there will be markers on the harp, like this harp has a plate up here that says Dusty Strings. That tells me exactly what it is. I don't think it has the model on it, but some harps actually have what it's called on it. Like I know Kristal has a Troubadour, it'll say Troubadour on there. Yeah.
And when they get really good, they can start saying like third octave or fourth octave C, but then you always have to double check that. Good. Okay.
But it's super important because not all third octave C's are created equal.
Right, because dusty strings versus pedal harp.
And that troubadour harp that Kristal has, that uses pedal harp strings, even though it's not a pedal harp. So that one can be pretty tricky.
So you could also ask your teacher.
Yes, ask your teacher as well.
Okay, guys, do you have any questions before wrapping up? No? Okay, well, thank you, Samantha.
You're welcome.
Amazing teacher, and I love all the gadget you have.
Yeah.
I just made a Christmas list for myself.
Yeah, these cutters, they're the best.
I want those, and I want the felt, and I want the this, yeah, and the bag. And the brush, yeah. Okay, well, thank